Yeah, go ahead. Um, what? I'm going to be using my computer, so maybe it doesn't need it. I don't need it. Just briefly, little Jai Radha Madhava and Sankirtan. Hava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kubijana Balava Ganadhari Kubijana Balava Kirivanadhari Yasura Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yasura Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Macha Bonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Dear Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivakajaya Astadada Sadasi Srimad Abhay Charnar Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Astadada Sadasi Srimad Srila Bhakti Saranta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. Sisi Radha Krishna Gopagopinath Shyamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sri Mayapur Dham ki jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi ki jai, Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda ki jai, Shri Harinand Sankirtana ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Garanga. All glories to Shri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Readings from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 14, text number 43 through 46. So we're gonna chant the verse for 43, and the other two we will pick up after. Na Brahma Dandadagdasya. Na Brahma Dandadagdasya. Na Bhuta Bhayadasya cha. Na Bhuta Bhayadasya cha. Narakascha nur grinanti. Narakascha nur grinanti. Yam yam yonim asaugata. Yam yam yonim asaugata. Na Brahma Dandadagdasya. Na Bhuta Bhayadasya cha. Na Bhuta Bhayadasya cha. Narakaschanu grinanti. Yam yam yonim asaugata. Gentlemen? Dandadagdasya. Na Brahma Dandadagdasya. Na Bhuta Bhayadasya cha. Narakasya Kushanugrana. Yam yam yonim asaugata. Na Brahma Dandadagdasya. Na Bhuta Bhayadasya cha. Narakasya grinanti. Yam yam yonim asaugata. Anybody else? Na Brahma Dandadagdasya. Na Bhuta Bhayadasya cha. Narakasya grinanti. Yam yam yonim asaugata. Na, never. Brahmadanda, punishment by a brahmana. Dagdasya, of one who is so punished. Na, neither. Bhuta Bhayadasya, of one who is always fearful to the living entities. Cha, also. Naraka, those condemned to hell. Cha, also. Anugrinanti, do any favor. Yam yam, whichever. Yonim, species of life. Asau, the offender. Gataha, goes. Like goes, going. Goes. Okay. Translation and purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. A person who is condemned by a brahmana or is always fearful to other living entities is not favored either by those who are already in hell or by those in the species in which he is born. Please repeat. A person who is condemned by a brahmana or is always fearful to other living entities is not favored either by those who are already in hell or by those in the species in which he is born. Purport. A practical example of a condemned species of life is the dog. Dogs are so condemned that they never show any sympathy to their contemporaries. So I'm just going to read the next two verses because there's no purports, and then we'll move on. Because of your lamentation, penitence, and proper deliberation, and also because of your unflinching faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and your adoration for Lord Shiva and me, one of the sons, Prahlad, of your son, Hiranyakashipu, will be an approved devotee of the Lord, and his fame will be broadcast equally with that of the Personality of Godhead. Text 46. In order to follow in his footsteps, saintly persons will try to emulate his character by practicing freedom from animosity, just as the purifying processes rectify gold of inferior quality. So, as usual, this is a verse that you have to put in context, so I always go back and try to catch up and get a sense of the whole story. And I've been away over a month, and so I'd like to just review the whole chapter of chapter 14, just to give us some perspective. So if you've been following along, coming every day, or perhaps reading on your own, this chapter is about the birth of the demons Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad Maharaja's father. And Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, is narrating the story of the conversation between sage Maitreya and Vidura, who's the brother of King Pandu, who's begging him to tell him more about the Lord's transcendental activities because he's just not satisfied. And it occurs to me that this is the nature of heart-connecting story sharing. When we share stories that are nourishing to our heart, we experience something called zest or inspiration, and we want to have more. So that's what Vidura is exhibiting here. He's just so nourished that he doesn't want Maitreya to stop. And it is true that when we meet kindred spirits who are eagerly trying to understand eternal truths about life, there's automatically a feeling of connection between the speaker and the hearer and vice versa. So these conversations between Maitreya and Vidura, they focus on the Lord of all life and love, who is residing within the hearts of all living beings. So at that level, no matter who is the speaker or the hearer, both are nourished on the platform of the heart. So Vidura asked Maitreya why the Lord, appearing as a boar, killed Hiranyaksha while the Lord was lifting the earth in the pastime in chapter 3 that we just finished. To give a little context of this verse of today, the parents of the demons Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu are Mother Diti and sage Kasyapa, who verses and stories, they're really a lot about various Prajapatis and their lives besides just procreating. And this happened. This pastime happened way back in Dwapara Yuga, hundreds and thousands of years ago. I don't even know. I tried to look it up. How many thousands of years is Dwapara Yuga? But it's a really long time ago. And during this yuga, the prescribed religious activities was to perform ritualistic sacrifices. So sage Kasyapa's main activity in life was sitting next to a sacrificial fire, throwing various items and ghee into it while chanting all kinds of Vedic mantras. So for those of you who might not be aware, fire is considered to be the mouth of Lord Vishnu. And so pretty much of all of our Hare Krishna ritualistic ceremonies, like initiations and marriage, and some ceremonies for babies and children that mark a developmental stage, involves throwing various items into the fire, along with a banana that represents our soul. We're putting it into the fire. It's a way of offering ourselves ritualistically to Lord Vishnu, who resides within the heart of all living beings. So in this age of Kali, although some Hindus are still very fond of performing ritualistic fire sacrifices to gain some material benefit, they are no longer considered to be the sacrifice for this age of Kali. Rather, Gaudiya Vaishnavas or Hare Krishna people, they perform the sacrifice of cooking ritual food offerings over a fire, offering them with love and devotion to Krishna, and then distributing those sanctified foods for the benefit of suffering humanity. So it's still a fire. We're still offering a sacrifice over a fire. And if you've never cooked before from scratch, I was a cook for 30 years for the devotees, which included a whole lot of festivals. It's an enormous yajna. It's an enormous sacrifice to cook, like to cook as your service. And making all those wonderful foodstuffs. Vedic sweets alone take hours and hours of standing and stirring and meditating. So in this age, this is our fire sacrifice, to cook prasadam and offer to Krishna with love and devotion and then distribute. So sage Kasyapa, he's sitting in meditation after having offered his oblations into the sacrificial fire, and his wife Diti, she expresses to him, she is apparently sitting there, or she's coming to that place, she's expressing to him her desire to engage in sex life to conceive a child. To quote this verse, she says, "Cupid is taking his arrows and distressing me forcibly as a mad elephant troubles a banana tree." So it's common knowledge in some Indian villages that elephants rampage their banana crops as they love bananas. If you Google mad elephants trouble banana trees, you will find lots of videos and articles about raging elephants and bananas. So this description of Diti's mood in this very moment sounds quite urgent. Like a mad elephant, she seems quite overcome with desire. Like an elephant can become quite impatient, waiting for its Mahut trainer to bring out the bananas. So at this moment, Kasyapa, he's finishing his meditation and mantra chanting, pretty much absorbed in a spiritual consciousness, and Diti presents him with her desire, justifying it by saying that she's basically envious of her co-wives. Apparently, sage Kasyapa had more than one wife, which I believe was common in that age, and she desired to have some sons, and so for these reasons, good reasons, she argues it will make Kasyapa happy. So Diti puts forward her pitch to Kasyapa, reminding him that a woman is honored in the world by the benediction of her husband, particularly as Kasyapa was an exalted sage. And she explains that as a Prajapati, a son of Brahma, the creator of the material world, his duty is to procreate for the expansion of living entities. So that's his job, having tons of children. So Diti reminds Kasyapa that her father, who was also a Prajapati and whose duty also was to populate the planet, asked her and all her sisters who they wanted to marry, and they had all chosen Kasyapa. So this is really good evidence that thousands of years ago, fathers cared so much for their daughters that they asked them who they wanted to marry. We have sometimes this notion in arranged marriage, that people are forced to get together. It's not really like that. There was no force involved. Because, in fact, if there was a forced marriage, there can be no love. Love means there's something voluntary happening here. It's done by one's own choice. So when Diti refers to her co-wives, they are also her sisters. So all of her sisters are married to the same person. And it's interesting to note that in a culture where procreation is the only goal of a person's life, and where a woman's only purpose in life is to have children, if she doesn't have one or more children, it's natural for her to feel a sense of deficiency when comparing herself to other women who do. And in the Vedas, it's described that a woman's jewel are her children. However, in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the goal of life is to cultivate love for the Supreme Being. And so whether a person has children or not is not a primary goal of life. That's not our primary goal. However, if a person has that desire, then dovetailing that desire in the service of Krishna turns it into a service and will inspire one to develop their love for God. They actually are using it in Krishna's service. So although many scriptures advocate women should all get married to be protected by a husband, many places lift up the reality that, in fact, a husband cannot truly protect a woman, and that only God can do that. And here's one such verse. Srimad Bhagavatam 5:18-19. My dear Lord, you are the fully independent master of all the senses. Therefore, all women who worship you strictly observe vows because they wish to acquire a husband. They do not know that such a husband cannot protect them or their children, nor can he protect their wealth or duration of life, for he is dependent on time, fruitive activities, and the modes of nature, which are all subordinate to you. And Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, and what for am I working? Now, Bipale Sevinu Kripana Durajana, just to serve persons who cannot protect me, who cannot protect me. We think that my wife, my husband, my children, my relatives or friends, and oh, so many of us have a relationship with this material world, and everyone is working to satisfy his relatives. A family man is working hard because he has to satisfy his wife, his children, his friends, and so many other people. But one should be conscious that these friends and relatives, they cannot protect me ultimately. Neither I can protect them, nor they can protect me. So, the conversation goes on with Deity offering all kinds of reasons why Kasyapa should stop what he's doing and satisfy her desire. So, as you can imagine, if you are one of 13 wives of one husband who spends most of his time performing austerities such as fire sacrifices, there's not a whole lot of interpersonal relating going on in terms of heart connection or caring relationship. The relationship kind of goes on through service and meditation, not so much through mutually revealing the mind, exchanging the gift of time, and sharing food and story, which are the formula for loving exchange promoted by Rupa Goswami, a prominent disciple of Lord Chaitanya. So noticing that, Deity, influenced by the modes of material nature, was pushing very hard to get her way, Kasyapa tries to pacify her by promising that he would fulfill her desire, glorifying how helpful it is for a man to have a wife to help him regulate his senses, and how a woman is the better half of a man's body because she shares in his pious activities and enables him to live without anxiety, knowing that his wife is taking care of all the household responsibilities. So I suspect in a hermitage like where they were living, you don't have electricity, you're doing things like going out and finding wood for the fire, or you are milking the cows and taking care of the milk products, which is an involved boiling it or turning it itself. There's no refrigeration. You've got to make cow patties, maybe, It's an enormous work. If you've ever lived in an Indian village and you're off the grid, it's a full-time job, just eating and finding ways to survive. So he's appreciative of that, and that gives him the ability to sit there all day and chant mantra and throw items into the fire. So he expresses his indebtedness to Deity for helping him in his spiritual life, and because he feels obliged to her for her dedication to her household duties, he agrees to satisfy her desire for sex for conceiving a child. But, he says, she must wait until the inauspicious time goes away, which is what it was at that time, apparently the time of twilight, which is when ghosts and the companions of Lord Shiva come out. So being a learned sage, Kardama understood the science of conceiving a nice child. He understood that it was important to conceive a child at an auspicious time after chanting mantras, so he encouraged Deity to wait until the inauspicious time had passed. But being insistent and a bit agitated, Kasyapa felt obligated to satisfy her desire, so he had sex with her at this inauspicious time. So to prepare himself to engage in sex, Kasyapa takes a bath and he begins meditating on the Lord's eternal effulgence, and he chants the Gayatri mantra. Meanwhile, Deiti's feeling some kind of guilt and shame for her insistence to conceive a child at an inauspicious time. And so she prays to her husband to protect her child from not being killed by Lord Shiva due to her offense, mainly as Lord Shiva is her brother-in-law.
And Didi is aware that it was offensive of her to disturb her husband's spiritual practice for her own agenda. This is a bit instructive for all of us in that when we are aware that someone is deeply absorbed in their spiritual practice, we kind of need to respect that and not barge in and interrupt them, particularly with some issues that could wait until they are finished. But then Kardama tells Diti that as the result of their sex act, Diti will have 2 worthless sons who will be a source of constant lamentation to her and all the 3 worlds, and they will kill innocent creatures, torture women, and enrage great souls. So as I was kind of thinking about this whole dynamic, pondering the whole exchange, and as a bit of a behavioral scientist myself, I'm feeling quite annoyed with Kasyapa, who completely removes himself, dissociates himself from his responsibility in the whole event by talking about it as if Diti acted alone. When in fact Kasyapa, who is aware of what the result of having sex at an inauspicious time would be, but did it anyway, then blamed Diti for it, and I find this to be his fault rather than Diti's. Just like if you say in the Vedic society that women are children, then children should be protected. And if a child says, okay, I wants to put his finger in the socket, as a parent, as the adult in the room, you're not going to feel obliged and allow the child to do that. So I have to lift that point up because typically this story is used to point to women as lusty, when actually, in my view, the lesson to be learned here is that a man or anyone responsible for subordinates or has dependents like women and children, and they express a desire that is not in their best interest or the best interest of human society, they have to step up and be the adult in the room and do what's right, not what's easiest. But instead, Kasyapa acts against his moral conscience. He knew better, and then he blames Diti for his own downfall, which is quite typical of people in the upper power position, that when they make a mistake, they tend to blame the most vulnerable person, knowing that they are dependent on them. But then Kasyapa says that the Lord, who is the well-wisher of all beings, will descend just to kill them, which is actually a blessing. Because if a person is killed by Krishna, then they go back to Godhead. And Diti thinks this is very good. So then the verse for today, this one, again, a person who is condemned by a brahmana or is always fearful of other living entities is not favored either by those who are already in hell or by those in the species in which he is born. And Prabhupada comments, a practical example of a condemned species of life is the dog. Dogs are so condemned that they never show any sympathy to their contemporaries. So in trying to understand what we can learn from this verse and purport about this dog, I have had to think a little more deeply about these words at face, than just their face value, because in the modern West, a dog is not so condemned. Many dogs are quite privileged, considering that they often live in a comfortable home as pets, and on the other hand, even privileged dogs, they tend to constantly defend their position, barking at anyone who might come to their home, like the mailman, or somebody comes, or sniffing you if you're new, as a means of guarding their territory. So that only makes sense to me if I'm thinking of it that way. Prabhupada comments that dogs are so condemned that they never show any sympathy to their contemporaries. And that's hard to understand in this context, so any of you who might have some insight onto this comment, please feel free to offer it at the end of this class. What? Contemporary. There's somebody like a peer. So even other dogs. He's not very sympathetic to other dogs. I mean, you're guarding your territory. So dog is kind of defending the home, and maybe another dog comes or another animal comes, and he's going to bark away that as well. So perhaps for me, as I continued thinking about how do you make sense of that in terms of something to learn for us for today, perhaps the meaning of this verse has more to do with dog-like people who are so covered by ignorance that they are constantly defending themselves, and they have a chronic victim mentality. Those who have a true Brahminical character are conditioned by the mode of goodness, on the other hand, which means they see things as they are. They are humble and honest, and they never blame others for their own faults or wrongdoing. And in that sense, such a condemned, dog-like, ignorant person finds themselves isolated and alone because they create enemies of even those who are otherwise might be considered their peers or contemporaries. You could say a dog, but you could say us as well, people who mean them well, who are their peers, their friends. A dog-like person who's in the mode of ignorance is expert at insulting others. It says that in the Bhagavad Gita. So, if you're always defending and blaming others for everything, then you're going to find yourself pretty alone, barking at everybody, trying to defend everything. And it has a tendency, when you're always defending and accusing others, you push people away. It's like people do go away then, and you're standing alone. So after Kardama pretty much shames and guilts Diti for approaching him for sex life to produce a child at an inauspicious time, he then tries to console her in the next verse by revealing to her that one of her grandsons of one of her demon sons would be an authentic devotee of the Lord. And in verse 44 and 45, he says, because of your lamentation, penance, and proper deliberation, and also because of your unflinching faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and your adoration for Shiva, one of your sons, and we know to be Prahlad Maharaj, he will be an approved devotee, and that will make a kind of redeem everything. So in order to follow footsteps of a saintly person, will try to emulate the character by practicing being free from animosity, just as the purifying processes rectify gold of inferior quality. So these are description of a character of a truly saintly person. You can study the behavior of yourself, and you can study the behavior of others and test out, against some of these characteristics. Am I a saintly person? Not so much. Are people who perhaps are posing as saintly persons, do they have the symptoms of a saintly person? Maybe not. So one of the symptoms of a saintly person is that they're free from animosity, which means they're free from resentment or active hostility in a way that they want to do harm to others. So after hearing all this, Diti felt very much satisfied. And it's just important to note, if you don't know the history of Diti and Kasyapa and Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksha, they were originally gatekeepers of Vaikuntha, named Jaya and Vijaya, and they were cursed by the 4 Kumaras, who also sons of Brahma, because they did not allow them to enter Vaikuntha. And then Lord Vishnu, the Lord of Vaikuntha, gave them an option of taking birth in the material world 10 times as a devotee or 3 times as a demon. So they chose to take birth 3 times as a demon just to get it over with and come back to Vaikuntha. But to learn something that will help us in our personal lives today, I realize that when we have people in our care who are our subordinates and are vulnerable, we are responsible for ensuring that we do not enable or facilitate them behaving in ways that are harmful to themselves and to human society, and that despite our feeling obliged to someone or thinking that we're obliged to someone, we are still responsible for our own choices. We can't say, oh, well, they pushed me to do it, and I didn't really want to do it, the devil made me do it. No, you made a choice, you get the consequences. And that is not appropriate or even ethical to blame someone else for our actions, which is what Kasyapa Muni was doing in this verse. So I'm going to stop here and invite comments, reflections, questions, anything. We have plenty of time to massage this topic. And if we're done, we're done. Any thought, question, reflection, any insights as you were here? What came up for you? Oh. Sadhana.
Hare Krishna, thank you for a really thoughtful class. I have this question, and I'm just going to ask it.
Okay.
So if you're protecting maybe the scriptures, could you be pushing other people away?
Say more about that. I'm not quite sure.
Well,
what you mean.
you spoke about the dog protecting the home, and I thought in your words you said they're pushing other people away. So I don't know why it came up for me that sometimes I think that maybe I'm protecting my lifestyle, my own Krishna consciousness, but I don't allow other people in because I'm protecting myself, maybe?
I don't know. I don't know what you do. I haven't seen you in action. I have to see what you do. I just have learned in my old age that there's no reason why you have to polarize. You know, we're all part of the same human family.
What does polarize mean?
Means us and them. You know, you're the non-devotee, so I'm the devotee here. I prefer to see us all as part of Krishna's family, and join people where they are, and not try to expect them to come to my level of awareness, but try to myself understand where they are and connect from there. I just think that it's inappropriate. It's also a bit arrogant to discredit people because they don't share your level of understanding. It's your job, if you know better, to do better and to explain Krishna consciousness in a way that's relatable, you know. And people should ask questions. That's what they're here to do. No one should follow blindly. And so Prabhupada said, by argument and reason, we follow, not just your blindly following. So each one of us has the responsibility to figure out, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why do I do that? So, you know, not just rattling off some kind of saying, urban legend, someone said it, that's what was told me, I'm going to just repeat that. But figure out how does that make sense to that person? You know, you really do have to put yourself in their position and know your audience. Who am I talking to here? What are the experiences they have? And it's also an offense to preach to the faithless. So if somebody just is not interested, just don't push it. You know? Yeah, if they're not hungry, don't feed them.
I can really appreciate what you just said and what you're saying. I think for me there's fear that it's almost like you're going down to their level to see where they're at, that I may get stuck there.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't have that experience. I think if you're solid and clear about what you believe and your practice, and that may be evolving all the time. You know, my understanding of Krishna consciousness 50 years ago is not at all like how I see it today. I think that's normal, and maybe some of the challenges that we get are really good to think about. Why not? You know, if you're that threatened by diversity and other people's perspective, and you're so rigid that your walls have to come more rigid, then maybe there's some issue with you. You know, it's not fear of God, it's love of God. And there's no reason why people can have different realizations of the same truth. That's the beauty of Bhagavatam. I mean, today, there are many things we can say about the scriptures. They're here for us to think about relational dynamics, relationship with God. It's not just one perspective. There are many things that you can, and having different speakers helps us see different perspectives. We're not Krishna, so we can't see it all. You need all these different perspectives. Yeah, well, it's my personal experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Anything else? Thoughts?
Thank you, Mataji. Very nice class. I think this is an extension of what Sadhana Mataji is saying about interacting with the, let's say, new guests and new people coming into the temple. I guess it's more of a comment. I don't see many devotees interested in connecting with the new people, and I don't know if we have lost the culture of sharing. And I mean, we supposedly we are a preaching movement. I mean, that's what I'm hoping we are, but seems like there's not much interest in sharing. We seem to focus on the institutional ways of reaching out, which is book distribution. Are you coming out on book distribution, Prabhuji? Are you coming out on Harinam, Prabhuji? And I personally do a bit of prasadam distribution, and there are so many opportunities to interact with people, because you can see they are touched and they want to know more. They want to get,
Yeah.
And I just don't see that interaction, and especially a place like this, where all these people are physically here. I mean, I confess I'm just lazy. I don't go out for Harinam. I don't go out for book distribution. I like to, but I have many excuses. Why? Because I see people here. They've come to your home.
Yeah.
And I've complained to Ajita a few times about, hey, we have so many people coming, and where are the devotees? Where is the congregation? You know. And I have personally approached a few of the families living outside who are good with people. Who, you know, I say, please come. You know, we can have prasadam and you can interact. And so, yeah, personally, I'm quite disappointed. And yeah, so I'm just wondering, have we lost that preaching spirit, or are we just so busy with our personal lives that we have no interest to share Krishna consciousness? So
Well, I can't speak for everybody. I don't know what other people's what's going on in them. I do think that we need to share our lives. I think that we transform through relationship, and my experience is that people don't know how to be in relationship, and it's in some ways no fault of their own. I mean, this culture called Kali Yuga is very impersonal. You know, perhaps we've grown up in families where there's not a lot of relationship. We've been institutionalized in schools that don't teach us much about interrelating either. We're kind of, you know, our skull is opened up and the teachers pour in the information, we regurgitate it and we pass, you know. So I do think that, you know, as personalists, and we are bhakti yogis are personalists, not impersonalists, we need to learn to be persons. And what does that mean? Krishna is a supreme person. What is a person? And how do we engage in personal relationship? I'm thinking people don't know quite how to do that. Rupa Goswami gives us a little hint with the 6 loving exchanges. But even then, we seem to have institutionalized that it's enough to come grab some food, prasadam, you know, giving and somebody's serving you prasadam, you're receiving prasadam, that's a loving exchange, and it is. And to give a gift, okay, I can give you some incense or garland, and that's a gift, that's nice. I can receive a gift, and I can reveal the different interpretations of what it means to reveal one's mind and hear one revealing their mind and heart. But I have, in my own realization, reduced those 6 to 3. It's really not just standing in line and getting food, sitting down and yapping about this and that while you're eating it. It's really about sharing a meal while you're sharing story and sharing time. That's the greatest gift. So I prefer, rather than incense and a devotional knick-knack as a gift, to have time with a person. Heart connecting time. Let's talk about you and me and what do we care about in terms of Krishna consciousness. What have you realized today? What are you learning that might inspire me? And so I guess it's just a question of time. People have to mature into that, and how important it is to learn to be in relationship. There's a real human fear of intimacy. That's research study. It's just people are afraid to get close because people hurt. It's one reason why people are very fond of the impersonal understanding of God, because people hurt. So I don't want God to be a person because it means I will maybe get hurt. So God's better off as a light and an energy. And so it's a part of a healing in terms of learning how to trust again human beings, because we've just been so hurt. So it takes time. And the only way to heal a broken heart is to have relationships with people who actually care about you, and over time you can trust through thick and thin, you know. This is part of living in community, is that when I'm in need, you come. When you're in need, I also come and I care. So all of those develop trust. And so that's part of our work. Hospitality is also part of developing love and trust. It's also part of our preaching. Just hospitality, you know. When people come in your home and share.
Maybe you should do a course on hospitality.
What?
Maybe you should do a course on basic hospitality.
Well, maybe you should do a course. No,
I mean, I'm just saying that it's just not an easy thing anymore. People prefer to text you than to talk to you. Like, I don't want to talk to them. I could call them up. I don't want to do that. It means I might have to talk to them. That kind of thing. That's kind of where we are in Kali Yuga. It's gotten to that. Anything else? Thoughts? Everybody's good? Yeah.
We're completely satisfied with your class. Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Rambhoru Mataji ki jai.
It's very nice to have you back.
Oh, nice to see you. Glad to see you
Rambhoru. Just hanging in by a thread. I could say a lot about that, but we haven't got time.